China controls 80% of the global supply of rare earth metals, and Mr. Lewis O'Connor is here to help everyday investors just like you tap into this strategic asset class before governments lock it down. He's the founder of Strategic Metals Invest, and he makes it possible to safely own and store metals that power everything from smartphones to fighter jets. So we're going to be talking today about this new oil, about some possible failures and successes, and help us explore this opportunity safely. Rare earth metals, it's exciting stuff. Mr. Lewis O'Connor, glad to be speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so tell us about this new oil, the rare earth materials. What are they?
Okay, well, I suppose I'll give you a quick quote. Like the president of the European Union recently said that rare earths are fast becoming as important, or maybe she said more important than oil and gas. So it's not just me sort of making up a big fat claim, if you will. And, I know your audience is in North America. I think President Trump has mentioned rare earths almost on I wouldn't say daily basis, but, they've been talking about in Ukraine and Greenland and stuff. So yeah, why are they the new oil and gas? Well, to be honest, I don't think oil and gas are really going away, but we will pivot somewhat from oil and gas to metals. Artificial intelligence obviously runs on data, but it relies on rare earths for the magnets, for the servers, for the computer chips that power these data centers. Energy transition, electric cars, solar, wind, defense. I mean, these are also, they have multiple applications. So they're energy transition, they're defense, they're all modern technology. And yeah, we're definitely, if we do transition, let's say over the next 15 years to a greener sort of a future, they will be at the forefront of it. They're the raw materials that are the backbone of manufacturing in this 21st century.
And that's where we want to be, right? If we're an investor of any kind, we want to ride that wave. We want to say, okay, well, where is the position now, but where will it be in the future? And if there will be more AI, more computers, more alternative fuels, all those things, then it makes logical sense that we need to look into and investigate these rare earth materials. And so are there like a series of popular ones? Is there like a pecking order, a hierarchy? Are some more in use or more in demand than others, or more valuable sometimes?
Yeah, good point, Robert. So look, the US Geological Survey lists about 45, maybe 50 metals that are critical to not just North America, but to all nations' economic prosperity, and increasingly as well military capabilities. Now, I'll just tell you quickly, first of all, exactly who we are. So before we talk about private investment, it's important people know what our core business is. It's not just a sales and marketing operation. So our core business is we buy metals from producers. A lot of times that's China, because China has a sort of an unrivaled dominance in rare earths. And so we're buying these raw materials and then we resell them to manufacturers. So we're a big operation. We've got more than 4,000 clients in 74 different countries around the globe. So it's important people know that that's who we are first, because if we weren't embedded in the industry, there'd be red flags everywhere. I mean, you can't, the chain of custody is very important. But anyway, the point I'm making is it's important people know that we are a recognized global industry player. And that's the only reason we can offer some of these metals to private investors. Now, just to answer your question, so out of the 45 or 50 that the US Geological Survey recognizes as critical to economic prosperity, we sell all of them to manufacturers, but not all of them are rare, and not all of them have, I suppose, the characteristics that would determine or that would allow them to become a physical asset. So out of that 45 or 50, there's about 8 or 10 that are relevant to private investors, and they would be gallium, germanium, indium, rhenium, dysprosium, praseodymium, terbium. And what makes them interesting as assets is they're the least produced, they're the most in demand, they have the most applications, and they also usually have some sort of a supply concentration risk where there's only one mine producing, or maybe one country is controlling. So yeah, there's a certain few that are relevant as physical assets.
Very cool. And it's fascinating to think about, right? About how there's, when you really narrow it down, you say, hey, there's some that are they're very rare and very in demand, and you combine that with they only come from this one mine. Like, man, that's, they talk about a gold mine. What's better than a gold mine, right? A rare earth mine. And so, what should we maybe know? Because I don't necessarily know about like what to ask about like
Sure.
strategic metals or gold or silver. So, like, what does the common investor need to know about metals or about rare earth materials?
Yeah. Well, you just actually touched on it there. You sort of hit the nail on the head, Robert, without realizing, which is you said, oh, I don't know too much about rare earth mines. And guess what? Most people don't. And guess what as well? There is no such thing as a rare earth mine. I mean, there is, but there isn't. Let me clarify that a bit further. So, what makes them interesting is geologists, for example, call them trace metals because they're only very rarely found in heavy concentrations. They're usually found in very, very low concentrations, and they're not worth mining. And they're always a byproduct of another raw material. So, a quick example, hafnium is a byproduct of zirconium mining. So for every 50 tons of hafnium, you only get 1 ton. Sorry, for every 50 tons of zirconium, you only get 1 ton of hafnium. So it's a byproduct of that. Gallium, for example, is a byproduct of aluminum. So in reality, you could actually, at one point, they were really waste materials or recycled because we didn't have a use for them. In fact, in 1960s, when we went black and white TV to color TVs, that's when we first used them in the screens. But then in the 1980s, with the arrival of modern technology and the technology age, it's just the demand for them has really skyrocketed. And now, for example, there's 12 or 13 technology metals and rare earths in one smartphone. So there's 12 or 13 semiconductors in one smartphone. If you think there's 800 pounds of rare earths in one F-35 fighter jet, they're in nuclear reactors, they're in nuclear powered submarines. So, there's not an industry they're not used in. And a few of them have that rare combination where they're very much in demand, very, very low supply, and they have a lot of applications and a lot of demand coming.
And when people talk about the commodities, there's this fear of like the price fluctuates a lot, right? People talk about gold, they talk about silver, and they're like, hey, it's gone up a lot, but like, will it go back down a lot? And so it's the way that you talk about the rare earth metals. It seems like you find a decent one, and there will always be some use for it, right? There'll always be semiconductors and smartphones and fighter jets. And so, uh, how do these rare earth metals compare to, say, when someone looks at gold or silver by comparison?
Okay, so they have been outperforming gold and silver. They've been sort of outperforming most major stock indexes as well. They're just not that well known, and once the fact, nowadays as well, people are beginning to talk about more of them. So I think you'll be hearing more about them. But what's interesting as well is the demand is increasing. I don't think anybody would argue that demand will not continue to increase for these raw materials. But what's interesting is because of the sort of supply limitations, there are now and again sort of what we call scarcity driven price increases. And that's where investors can really profit. I'll give you a quick example, actually, right at the moment. When President Trump announced tariffs, China counter came back with tariffs as well. But what they also said, and this was in April, is we're going to restrict the export of 7 rare earths worldwide, not just to the US, although it was targeted at the US. 2 of those rare earths we offer to private investors. So there's been a shortage of them. So they've really, really spiked in price. And at the moment, we're offering to buy back, from our private investors at a premium price. plus 20%, maybe plus 40%. So on a good day, there's demand and there's a steady increase. But also every now and again, you'll have these scarcity driven price increases, and investors can profit from that as well.
Very cool. And it's great to know about this, right? Because there's what you hear about every day, but there's, hey, we like the secret hot tips and things like that. And so as far as us tapping into these rare earth metals, you said a little bit here that you've kind of figured out these deals and you're a big time company. And so what should we know about like who is able to invest with you, and what should we know as far as the investing with you side of things?
So it's open to everybody, Robert. Minimum investment is $10,000. Clients can buy, one metal, or they can buy five, or even probably eight or 10 in that mix. We do recommend diversification. It doesn't have to be accredited. It's a growing business. The clients physically own the asset. So it's the same paradigm as owning gold or silver. And we also then have a practice of buying them back for our inventory, or to mediate a sale to one of our many 4,000 industry buyers. So it's a sort of a full circle that we offer. We offer industry grade metals, we offer storage in a recognized facility, and then of course we have a practice of buying them back and reselling them, or putting them in our inventory or reselling them to a manufacturer. So everything is in place. It's a turnkey operation for the private investor.
And I imagine that there might be someone out there who's like just doing their research, right? The internet's great for that, where they say, hey, I'm looking into the rare earth metals and I've heard some of this advice from Lewis. I'll go out and do it myself, or I'll go find some other company. And why shouldn't they? What do you have that's special and unique? Like, what do you maybe have tapped into that maybe someone would make a mistake or miss out on if they tried this themselves?
Good point. Yeah. So we're in business on the industry side since 1999, Robert. And as I said, our core business is buying and selling metals. And I know people could probably go online, even to eBay and Amazon, and I just hope they wouldn't. You could buy maybe a small amount there, but that's just for a hobbyist. But I've had a few people sort of make inquiries with me, and I talk to them, and they might even be able to source a kilo from China, or, maybe from Canada or different places like that. Now, you can do that. But if somebody's offering you these raw materials and willing to deliver them, they're not an investment, because they're out of the chain of custody. And no manufacturer, Apple, Siemens, will buy any of these raw materials from anybody except a recognized supplier like yourself. So if you're a hobbyist, go ahead and buy, small amounts and enjoy them. But don't, if you're serious about investing, we're the only industry supplier who invites. Basically, what we're doing is we're inviting private investors to participate in the supply chain with us, and they're helping us, because when there are shortages, we have inventory. Our private investors have inventory. We can go to them like we're doing right now and say, look, now's a good time to sell. Would you like to sell? We'll give you market value plus 20%. They're really needed. So it's a sort of a great win-win for us and for the private investors, because there are shortages. I mean, it happens all the time, and if you're, it's just being positioned at the right time.
Oh yeah. So there are the shortages, and that chain of custody is really important. And in all of your travel, you say you've been doing this for decades. Has there been anything with the rare metals that's really like shocked or surprised you, or just blew your mind in some way?
Well, what we knew was brewing is become a reality, which is China now can economically weaponize rare earths, and they've just done it in the last 60 days. They've restricted the export. If people Google a little bit, they'll see that the CEO of Ford Motor Company said, if we don't get rare earths, we've only got about 3 or 4 months inventory. So we were very close to seeing factories shutting down, and there was a mad sort of a scramble. The Chinese and the American administrations met in Geneva, and then they met in London just a few weeks ago, and they've sort of apparently patched things up. I would say it's an uneasy truce. But the reality is, China has an unrivaled position, and Europe and the US have no. We need to wean our dependence off China. So to see them just flex that muscle, they've been building like China's about a generation and $1 trillion investment ahead of the rest of the world in rare earths, and they've flexed their muscles before, but it's only in the last 60 days they've actually said, okay, we won't sell them to you. You know, the funny thing is, right, Robert, somebody said in Europe recently, and it was very true, they said, we're sort of in a Cold War 2.0, if you will, except this time it's not an arms race or a nuclear arms race. It's a semiconductor race. It's about precision and chips and technology. Now, the West has the technology, America, Europe, but China have the raw materials. And what we're seeing is, for example, what happened was the US and Europe were sort of limiting or trying to only allow, not, well, they wouldn't allow the most recent, the best sort of computer chips get to China. And China, in retaliation for that, um, can these are the raw materials that are needed in the computer chips. So the West has the technology, but the Chinese have the raw material. And funny enough, just today I just saw that Tesla announced a deal with I think Samsung to supply them with computer chips. So it's a very, very interesting time. But at this present time, China has an unrivaled position.
And can anything be done? Is it a matter of like striking better deals with other countries, or is this something that us as investors have to just navigate?
Well, it's happening everywhere. I mean, the U.S. Department of Defense just signed a deal last week with, in your part of the world, MP Materials in California. MP Materials is the only mine in North America that's producing rare earths. But until very recently, they still had to sell all of their raw materials, if you will, to China to be processed. Because, as we discussed earlier, rare earths, they don't occur naturally. So it's more of a metallurgical process than a mining process. So they're all very chemically similar and sort of stuck together. So they have to be extracted, separated, and then remetallized to purity levels that are safe to put into an F-35 fighter jet, for example. So the technology to do that, China is about a generation ahead. We don't, I think MP Materials from California are building, they are, in fact, I know, building a processing facility in Texas. But if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I saw the CEO of MP Materials on CNBC, and he was asked when they're at full capacity, how much of a dent will that put in, the demand in America? He said probably 1%. So what he's saying is, even if they get up to full capacity, we've still a long, long way to go to catch up on China. We need hundreds more mines of these raw materials. Now, despite the name as well, Robert, they're not always all that rare. In fact, the U.S. Department of Defense, or no, maybe the U.S. Department of Energy, is also funding research into there's 500,000 abandoned coal mines in the U.S. with mine tailings. There's rare earths there, but the technology, the human capital, the engineering expertise is not. So, there's the will certainly there now, and the materials are there, but it'll take a while. I think there's about 100,000 people working in the mining industry in the US, half of which will retire by 2030. And who's mining these days? Who wants to mine? They don't have to recruit and train metallurgists.
Right. So many seismic shifts and many things that change, but that means there's money to be made, right? Especially if you see those shifts coming. And so you've been giving us a wonderful education so far about mining and about raw earth metals. But since I just met you and I'm not an expert, you're the expert, is there a missing hidden question in our conversation that I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you?
Let me think. You've sort of nearly covered it all, though. You did touch on like how, I suppose, the supply demand dynamic, like where we are today. Is there any sort of a quick fix there? The answer is no. There isn't at the moment. I suppose what we didn't cover, maybe there's pros and cons to everything. And, I've been, I suppose, and I am bullish and I am positive about the outlook. None of our investors have lost money if they have been aligned with our strategy. We have a specific strategy to private investors, which is to hold them for 5 years to make money. But what I would say is, what are the pros and the cons? So, indium, for example, you can swipe, you can scroll because of indium. So people are touch indium hundreds of times a day, millions and billions of people. Yet nobody knows they can own it as an asset, right? But what could happen is somebody could come up with a better metal or a technology to scroll. So in that case, you might see the demand decrease for indium. That's the only thing maybe you didn't ask me. And then, of course, um, substitution, that's the most important thing, or the most thing to be wary of. A better technology could substitute. Luckily, though, all of these raw materials have multiple applications. Like gallium has over 3,000 military applications, as well as God knows how many civilian. So luckily, if demand tapers off, it'll probably be picked up elsewhere.
And it's all around us, right? All these different types of metals, all kinds of uses, and we just take it for granted. But if we're an investor, it's something to look into. And how can someone look into this? You mentioned earlier that someone should have $10,000 or more. But if someone says, man, Lewis and Robert, they sure got me excited about the possibilities of rare earth metals and all the investing that goes along with that. How does someone know if they're a right fit for you? And if they are, where should they go? What should they do?
So they could reach out. I mean, go to our website, strategicmetalsinvest.com. They can even email me, Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com. Mention Robert Plank. And we like to get people sort of to stay in that information gathering mode first for a while. There's quite a bit to learn. It's sort of a quick study. It's supply and demand. It's very simple. You have raw materials that are in demand. You have limited supply. Supply is also subject to disruption. You have the potential for profit. So the paradigm is very, very simple and straightforward. But we do like to get people educated on the metals themselves. Like some people might, for example, like AI, what metals are going to be really needed for AI? That's one of the big demand drivers coming. Or somebody might prefer energy transition, or both, or defense metals, or space technology. So yeah, they can get very, very well educated at the website, Robert, and I'll always be happy to have a call with people as well. We want people to get really, really well informed, and then when they're comfortable, make an informed decision.
That makes logical sense. Know what you're getting yourself into, know what you're investing into. And so the place where you can get that education that Mr. Louis O'Connor was mentioning is strategicmetalsinvest.com, because strategic metals are the backbone of manufacturing in the 21st century. And Mr. Louis says that when you own strategic metals and rare earths as physical assets, then you own that downstream that raw materials have that become trillions of dollars in upstream GDP and high-tech products. We're talking about mobile phones, electric cars, wind turbines, solar power, jet engines, computer chips, fiber optic cables. It's overwhelming. It's all around us. But hey, we can get educated and tap into this amazing resource. We go to strategicmetalsinvest.com. It's this new alternative asset class, inflation and crisis proof. It helps you preserve your wealth, and it's a unique investment strategy that has outperformed stocks and gold. So as people are headed to strategicmetalsinvest.com, Mr. Louis O'Connor, it's time for the scary part of the podcast, where I try to stump you, I try to put you on the spot by asking about a fun quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind for a fun quote or lesson?
Somebody said to me, not too recently, but not maybe a bit longer than that. And it was a great learner, actually. They said, Louis, they sort of said, where your problem is on this topic. I went, yeah, what is it? And he said, you think you're in the results business and you're in the planning business. And, it was a great lesson to learn about when the work is done, if you will, just let it go. We all wake up every day and we have a plan and we've plenty to do. And it's just nice to be able to sort of realize once the work is done, we have to let it go. We don't always, we like to think we've control over the outcome and what the results are going to be, and we're aiming for a certain result. But it's just, it's like when you put a team out for a final, in the World Cup or whatever it is. They've done, once you've done all the training, once you've done all the preparation, once you've done everything you possibly can to get the result, at some point you just have to let it go and allow that to happen. And I like that because um, it gives you some freedom, instead of always, sort of trying to control the outcome, if you will. Know when the point is to let it go.
Yeah, of course. Know when to let it go. You only have so much control over that outcome. Prepare, do your best, and repeat in the next iteration. And let's consider that, think about that as we go to strategicmetalsinvest.com to find about how you purchase a physical, tangible asset similar to buying gold bullion bars. It's considered inflation and crisis proof. The demand for your asset is strong and growing because strategic metals are needed in many of these high-tech products we mentioned. So go to strategicmetalsinvest.com. There's so much information there. It's so helpful. There's news items, there's a phone number, there's a brochure you can download. strategicmetalsinvest.com. We'll see you there. And it's been wonderful speaking with you, Mr. Louis O'Connor, to be educated about the fast-paced, amazing world of rare earth metals, investing and mining. Thanks for being here. Thanks for helping us out.
Thank you, Robert.